Deep in the rugged wilderness of Montana, where snow-draped forests meet towering peaks, a shocking discovery would change everything. A brown bear, once mighty and majestic, was found teetering on the edge of survival. Its massive frame was marred by wounds so strange they resembled honeycombs carved into its flesh. The locals whispered of strange infections or violent encounters, but no one knew the truth. When one man decided to step in, risking his own safety to save this mysterious creature, what followed was a story of resilience, hope, and heartbreak. Stay with us for a journey that will challenge everything you think you know about courage and compassion. The snow fell in thick, heavy flakes as Sam Pearson trudged through the dense forest. A retired park ranger, he had dedicated his life to protecting the wilderness he loved. Now in his 60s, he spent his days exploring the lands near his remote cabin in Montana. It was during one of these hikes that he noticed something unusual, a trail of blood streaked across the snow. At first, he assumed it was from a deer injured by wolves, a common occurrence in the harsh winters. But as he followed the crimson trail deeper into the woods, he realized it wasn't just blood. Tufts of brown fur clung to tree trunks, and the paw prints in the snow were massive. Sam froze. A bear, this close to his cabin? He pressed on cautiously, gripping his walking stick tightly as the trail led him to a clearing. His breath caught. There, lying motionless against a fallen log, was the bear. Its enormous body heaved with labored breaths, its fur matted with blood and dirt. But what shocked Sam the most were the wounds. They weren't the gashes of a predator's attack or the clean lines of a hunter's bullet. They were strange, circular holes, almost symmetrical, dotting its shoulders and back like an unnatural mosaic. Sam crouched low, his heart pounding. The bear was alive, but barely. He could see the rise and fall of its chest, each breath a struggle. Flies buzzed around the wounds, and the stench of infection was overwhelming. Sam had seen injuries before, he had even assisted in wildlife rescues during his ranger days. But nothing like this. What could have caused such damage? And why was the bear here, so close to human territory? He knew he couldn't leave it. The bear wouldn't survive another night in the freezing temperatures. But how could one man possibly help a creature so massive, so wild? Sam glanced at the fading light. He had to act fast. The sun was dipping low, painting the snow-covered forest in shades of gold and gray. He needed help, but out here, there was no one to call. The nearest ranger station was miles away, and the bear wouldn't last that long. If he wanted to save it, he had to act now. Pulling on his thick woolen scarf, Sam approached the bear cautiously. "Hey there, big guy," he murmured, his voice steady despite the fear curling in his gut. The bear's ears twitched at the sound, but it didn't move. Its eyes, half-closed and glassy, barely acknowledged him. Sam knew he was on borrowed time. He wrapped the scarf around a sturdy branch, creating a makeshift tourniquet to stem the worst of the bleeding on the bear's shoulder. The circular wounds were deep, pus oozing from their edges. He didn't have the tools to treat it here, but he could at least stabilize the bear enough to move it. The real challenge was how to transport the animal. Sam's cabin wasn't far, but the bear was massive, easily 500 pounds. Dragging it would be impossible, and leaving it alone could mean its death. Then an idea struck him. Just a mile back, he had passed an old sled he used for hauling firewood. It wasn't ideal, but it might work. "Hang in there," Sam whispered as he stood. The bear let out a low, guttural groan that sent chills down his spine. He sprinted through the forest, his breath clouding in the icy air, and reached the sled just as the last rays of sunlight disappeared. Hauling it back to the clearing was grueling, but adrenaline kept him moving. Back at the clearing, Sam positioned the sled next to the bear. "All right, big guy, let's get you out of here." Using every ounce of strength, he managed to roll the bear onto the sled. It let out a pained growl but didn't resist. Sam secured it with rope, whispering soothing words as he worked. The journey back to the cabin was slow and arduous. The sled dragged heavily through the snow, and Sam's muscles burned with the effort. Every so often, he stopped to check on the bear, ensuring it was still breathing. Each shallow rise and fall of its chest felt like a small victory. Finally, after what felt like hours, the cabin came into view. Warm light spilled from the windows, a stark contrast to the cold, dark forest. Sam pushed through the last stretch, his legs trembling with exhaustion. He pulled the sled up to the porch and carefully unloaded the bear onto a pile of blankets he had laid out earlier. Inside, he lit a fire and grabbed his first aid kit. He knew this was only the beginning. Treating the bear's wounds would be dangerous, and there was no guarantee it would survive. But Sam had made a choice. He wasn't going to let this creature die, not without a fight. As the fire crackled and the wind howled outside, Sam knelt beside the bear, his hands steady despite the weight of what lay ahead. "You're safe now," he whispered. "We'll get through this together." The bear stirred for the first time since Sam had brought it into the cabin. Its massive paw twitched, claws scraping against the wooden floor. Sam watched from the other side of the room, his heart racing. He had no idea how the bear would react when it fully regained consciousness. Would it panic? Attack? Or worse, try to escape and injure itself further? He moved cautiously, keeping his voice low. "It's okay, big guy. You're safe here." He hoped the calm tone would soothe the animal, though he knew trust wouldn't come easily. Sam had spent the night cleaning the wounds as best he could. The infection was severe, and without antibiotics, the bear's chances were slim. He'd used what little supplies he had, iodine, clean rags, and a steady hand, but he knew it wasn't enough. The strange, honeycomb-like wounds baffled him. They didn't resemble anything he'd seen in his decades as a ranger. They weren't bite marks, nor did they look like injuries from a trap. It was as if something had eaten away at the bear's flesh in perfect circular patterns. As the bear's eyes fluttered open, Sam froze. Its gaze locked onto him, deep brown eyes filled with pain and fear. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, the bear let out a low, rumbling growl that reverberated through the cabin. Sam held his ground, raising his hands slowly to show he wasn't a threat. "Easy now," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." The bear didn't lunge or try to get up. Instead, it lowered its head back onto the blankets, its breathing shallow but steady. Sam released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. This was a fragile truce, but it was a start. Over the next few days, Sam established a routine. He spoke to the bear often, his voice filling the otherwise silent cabin. "You need a name," he said one evening as he prepared a meal. "How about Bramble? You remind me of the bramble bushes out back, tough, but there's life hidden underneath." The bear, of course, didn't respond, but Sam liked to imagine it understood. He worked tirelessly to keep Bramble alive, venturing out in the freezing cold to gather fresh snow for water and hunting small game to provide food. Each time he returned, he was met with the same wary but calm gaze from the bear. The first breakthrough came on the 5th day. As Sam approached with a bowl of water, Bramble lifted its head and sniffed the air. It was the first sign of curiosity, a small but significant step. Sam knelt a few feet away, sliding the bowl closer with a steady hand. Bramble hesitated, then lapped at the water cautiously. Sam smiled. That's it. One step at a time. But trust was a two-way street. Sam knew that as much as he was helping the bear, Bramble was teaching him something too: patience, resilience. The fragile bond they were forming felt like a lifeline, not just for the bear but for Sam himself. Out here in the wilderness, they only had each other. As days turned to weeks, Sam and Bramble found an uneasy rhythm. The bear's wounds, though still severe, began to show signs of healing. Sam's determination to see Bramble through to recovery had become a singular focus in his life. But with healing came strength, and with strength came new challenges. One icy morning, as Sam chopped wood outside, the faint sound of voices carried through the forest. At first, he thought it was the wind, but as he paused, axe in hand, the voices grew louder. They were unmistakably human. Sam's heart sank. In this remote corner of Montana, visitors were rare and often unwelcome. Poachers, in particular, had become a growing problem in recent years. The idea of someone stumbling upon Bramble in this vulnerable state was unthinkable. He hurried inside and secured the door, glancing at Bramble, who lay stretched out near the fireplace. The bear's ears twitched, picking up the distant sounds. Its gaze met Sam's, and for a moment, Sam felt as though the animal understood the danger. Grabbing his rifle, something he rarely used but always kept handy, Sam stepped back outside. He followed the voices cautiously, his boots crunching against the snow. As he crested a small hill, he spotted them, two men in camouflage, carrying rifles. They were scanning the forest, their eyes sharp and predatory. Sam's stomach turned. Poachers. And they were far too close to the cabin. Morning, Sam called out, forcing a casual tone. The men turned, startled. You're a long way from the main trails. One of them, a tall man with a scruffy beard, stepped forward. Just out hunting, he said, his voice gruff. Seen anything worth tracking? Sam shook his head. Not much this way. Mostly deer, but nothing big. The second man, shorter and stockier, narrowed his eyes. What about bears? Sam's grip tightened on the rifle. Haven't seen any in weeks, he lied. They're scarce this time of year. The men exchanged a glance, clearly unconvinced. Mind if we take a look around? The bearded one asked, his tone more of a statement than a question. Actually, I do, Sam said firmly. This is private land. The tension hung heavy in the air. Finally, the men shrugged and turned back toward the woods, though their movements were slow, deliberate. Have a good day, the shorter one called over his shoulder, his tone dripping with insincerity. Sam watched them disappear into the trees, his heart pounding. He knew they'd be back. Poachers didn't give up easily, especially when they suspected a prize as big as a bear might be nearby. Back at the cabin, Sam knelt beside Bramble, running a hand over the bear's thick fur. We've got trouble, big guy, he murmured. But I'm not letting them get to you. As the wind howled outside, Sam began to formulate a plan. Protecting Bramble would mean risking everything, but for Sam, there was no other choice. The forest was eerily silent the next morning, as if it, too, sensed the impending danger. Sam had spent the night preparing. He barricaded the windows, set up a makeshift alarm system using old tin cans, and made sure his rifle was loaded. Bramble, now more alert, seemed to sense the tension. The bear paced the small cabin, its massive frame dwarfing the furniture. We've got one shot at this." Sam muttered to himself, glancing out the window. "If they come back, we need to be ready." He didn't have to wait long. By midday, the sound of crunching snow reached his ears. Peering through a crack in the curtains, he saw them, the same two men, now with a third, approaching cautiously. They carried rifles slung over their shoulders, their eyes scanning the cabin and the surrounding forest. Sam's heart pounded. He stepped outside, his rifle in hand. "I told you, this is private land," he called out, his voice steady but firm. The tall man smirked. "Relax, old man. We're just passing through." "Then pass through somewhere else," Sam replied, his grip tightening on the rifle. "There's nothing for you here." The shorter man stepped forward, his expression hard. "We know there's a bear here. You can't keep something like that hidden forever." Sam's blood ran cold. "There's no bear. You're wasting your time." "We'll see about that," the tall man said, his tone dripping with menace. As they took a step closer, Bramble let out a deep, guttural growl from inside the cabin. The sound was primal, a warning that sent a shiver down Sam's spine. The men froze, their eyes darting toward the sound. "That's your only warning," Sam said, raising his rifle. "Turn around and leave. Now." For a moment, it seemed like they might push their luck, but the combination of Sam's unwavering stance and the unmistakable threat of the bear inside the cabin made them hesitate. With a muttered curse, the men backed away, disappearing into the trees. Sam lowered the rifle, his hands trembling. He knew they'd be back, and next time, they wouldn't come alone. But for now, he and Bramble had won a small victory. Back inside, Sam sank into a chair, exhaustion washing over him. Bramble approached, nudging his shoulder with its massive head. "We did it, big guy," Sam said, his voice thick with emotion. "But this isn't over." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the cabin, Sam knew the fight was far from finished. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a spark of hope. Together, he and Bramble could face whatever came next. The day Sam had been dreading arrived with an eerie stillness. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the trees standing as silent witnesses to the storm that was about to unfold. Sam woke before dawn, his body tense with the anticipation of confrontation. Bramble, now more mobile but still healing, paced restlessly near the fireplace, emitting low grumbles that sounded like a mix of pain and determination. By mid-morning, the familiar crunch of boots on snow echoed through the forest. This time, there were more voices. Sam's heart sank as he peered through the window. 5 men, armed and determined, were making their way toward the cabin. Among them were the 2 he'd confronted before, but their reinforcements made their intentions clear. They weren't here for a polite conversation. Sam grabbed his rifle and checked the barricades. He'd fortified the cabin as best he could, but it wasn't built to withstand a siege. Bramble, sensing the tension, let out a low growl that seemed to vibrate the walls. "Easy, big guy," Sam murmured. "We'll get through this." The men spread out as they approached, their movements calculated. One of them called out, "We know you've got the bear. Hand it over, and no one gets hurt." Sam stepped onto the porch, his rifle raised. "This is private property," he said firmly. "Turn around and leave." "We're not leaving without the bear," the leader replied, his voice cold. "That thing's worth a fortune." "It's not for sale," Sam shot back. "And it's not leaving this property." The standoff escalated quickly. One of the men fired a warning shot into the air, and Bramble's roar tore through the silence. The sound was so powerful it made even the armed men hesitate. Bramble stepped into view, towering behind Sam, its eyes blazing with a mix of fear and fury. "Call it off," one of the men shouted, his confidence wavering. "Not a chance," Sam replied. "Leave, or you'll regret it." What happened next unfolded in a blur. One of the poachers raised his rifle, aiming for Bramble. Before he could fire, Sam pulled the trigger. The crack of his shot echoed through the trees. The man dropped his weapon, retreating as chaos erupted. Bramble charged forward with surprising speed, its roar shaking the ground. The poachers scattered, their confidence shattered by the sheer force of the animal's presence. Within moments, the men were gone, disappearing into the forest as quickly as they'd come. Sam lowered his rifle, his hands trembling. Bramble returned to his side, its massive frame heaving with effort. "We did it," Sam whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We made it." The cabin was quiet again, but the air was charged with the energy of what had just transpired. Sam knelt beside Bramble, running a hand through its fur. "You're safe now," he said softly. "No one's ever going to hurt you again." As the sun set that evening, casting golden light across the snow, the cabin was quiet again, bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. Bramble lay stretched out near the fireplace, its deep, rhythmic breaths filling the room with a sense of peace that had been absent for days. Sam leaned back in his chair, his rifle resting across his lap. For the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to exhale fully. "We made it," he said softly, glancing at Bramble. The bear's ears twitched, and its dark eyes seemed to meet Sam's for a fleeting moment. Sam liked to think there was understanding in that gaze, gratitude, perhaps. The fight with the poachers had left its mark. The cabin bore scars of the standoff, broken windows hastily boarded up, the faint smell of gunpowder still lingering in the air. But Sam and Bramble were alive. And that was all that mattered. Over the following weeks, life settled into a new rhythm. Bramble grew stronger each day, its wounds slowly healing under Sam's careful attention. The bond between them deepened, forged in the crucible of survival. Sam often found himself marveling at the bear's resilience, its sheer will to live despite the odds stacked against it. One morning, as the first light of dawn crept over the mountains, Sam opened the cabin door to find Bramble standing at the threshold. The bear sniffed the crisp air, its massive frame silhouetted against the pink and orange sky. Sam felt a pang of sadness in his chest. He knew this moment was coming. "It's time, isn't it?" he murmured. Bramble turned its head, gazing at him with those deep, soulful eyes. Sam swallowed hard, fighting the lump rising in his throat. "You're ready now." He stepped aside, giving Bramble space to move. The bear hesitated for a moment, then lumbered forward, its powerful strides carrying it toward the tree line. Sam followed at a distance, watching as Bramble paused to sniff the ground, then continued into the forest. At the edge of the clearing, the bear stopped and turned back, its gaze lingering on Sam. The man raised a hand in a silent farewell, his heart heavy yet full. "Be free, big guy," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You've earned it." Bramble let out a low, rumbling sound, a noise that Sam chose to interpret as a goodbye, before disappearing into the wilderness. The forest seemed to close around the bear, its towering trees swallowing the creature whole. Sam stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where Bramble had vanished. When he finally returned to the cabin, it felt emptier than before. The silence was almost oppressive, but Sam knew it was a sign that things were as they should be. Bramble belonged out there in the wild, where it could live freely and fully. And Sam? He had found his purpose again, even if it was fleeting. As the days turned into weeks, Sam continued his solitary life in the wilderness. He would often find himself looking out at the forest, wondering how Bramble was faring. Sometimes, in the dead of night, he thought he heard a distant roar carried on the wind. He liked to imagine it was Bramble, thriving, roaring not out of pain, but out of the sheer joy of being alive. If this story touched your heart, remember that resilience and compassion can make a difference in the world, no matter how small. Sam's act of courage and kindness reminds us that every life, human or animal, is worth fighting for. Bramble's journey from the brink of death to freedom is a testament to the strength we all carry within us. If you believe in stories like this, subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and share this video with someone who needs a little hope today. Let's spread the message of courage, connection, and the power of second chances. Together, we can make the world a better place, one story at a time.